Indentation. What is indentation? In this session we will talk about the indentation. Let me define indentation here. Giving proper tapes to the lines of codes is what we call indentation. Indentation means to give the proper tapes to the lines of codes of Python. What do we mean by the tabbing? The tabbing means the proper space. In other words, we can say that where the line has to be started. What is the starting point? The proper tabbing, the tabbing to the lines of codes is called indentation. This is a simple definition for the indentation that we have. Global scope indentation. Let's talk about the global scope indentation. For example, this is my first line of code. This is my second line of code, third line of code, and fourth line of code. All these lines come under the global scope indentation. Look at here, if you have a single line of codes, two lines of codes, three lines of codes, and four lines of code, if the lines come right below each other, they come under the global scope indentation. Look at here, this is the single indentation that we have. There is no other indentation, there is no inner indentation, and there is no other outer indentation. I mean, there is not a single line of codes which starts before these four lines. Therefore, this is the only indentation which we consider the outermost indentation. So the outermost indentation is called the global scope indentation. Since there is no inner indentation, therefore this is only the global scope indentation. This is the only outermost indentation. So they come under the global scope indentation. Because look, all the lines starts from the same point. So the second line is right below the first line. The third line is right below the second line. And the fourth line is right below the third line. So they are right below each other. They start from the same point. So it's a single outermost indentation. The outermost indentation is called the global scope indentation. Now let's talk about the local scope and global scope indentation. Now we are going to talk about the global scope along with the local scope indentation. We just saw the global scope indentation. Now we will check the local scope and global scope indentation in the Python program. For example, if I have my first line of codes, this is my second line of codes, and then I put colons, press the enter button, your new line will start from here. This is my third line of codes, and this is my fourth line of codes. These two lines of codes come under the global scope indentation, and these two lines of codes come under the local scope indentation. Look, we are talking about the local scope and global scope indentation. We know that the outermost indentation is called the global scope indentation. If you look to the first two lines, line 1 and line 2, these are the outermost lines. There is no other line which starts before these two lines. So this is the outermost indentation. But as I told you, what do we mean by the indentation? Indentation means the proper tabbing of the lines of codes, which means that the starting point of the lines, where the line has to start. The starting point of this line is here, and the starting point of the second line is the same. So they come right below each other. The second line is right below the first line. So this is the outermost indentation. This is the outermost beginning point of the lines. Therefore, they come under the global scope indentation. The outermost indentation comes under the global scope indentation. But what about these two lines? When you put colons and then press the enter button, your new line will start from here, not from here. When you press the enter button, automatically your new line will start from here. There will be blinking in the collab, which shows that you have to start the new line of codes from here, not from here. So after colons, when you press the enter button, your new line will start from here. And then we have another line, the fourth line of codes, which comes right below the third line. Look, these two lines start from the same point. So they are called the local scope indentation. This is inner indentation. This is the outer indentation. The outermost indentation is called the global scope indentation. The inner indentation comes under the local scope indentation. So this is my local scope indentation. This is my global scope indentation. I hope you got the point now. Let me check you another pattern of the local scope and global scope indentation. I have my first line of codes, and then my second line of codes, and then my third line of codes, and then the fourth line of codes. Look, this is the outermost line. This is the outermost indentation. So it is the global scope indentation. This is my first inner indentation, second inner indentation, and the third inner indentation. Look at here, we have 4 lines of codes. The first line of codes, the second line of codes, the third line of codes, and the fourth line of codes. After the first line of codes, I have colons. When you press the enter button after the colons, your new line will start from here, not from here, from here. Automatically it will start from here. You have to write from here, not from here. And then I have colons after the second line of codes. Pressing the enter button, my third line starts from here. And then again I have colons in the third line. After pressing the enter button, your new line of codes will start from here. Now, this is the outermost line. So it is the outermost indentation. Indentation, as I told you, means the tabbing of the line of codes. The beginning point of the line of codes, where the line has to be started. So this is the outermost indentation. There is not a single line which starts before this line of codes. This is the outermost line of codes. So it comes under the global scope indentation. But when you look to the other 3 lines, they come under the local scope indentation with respect to the first line. Now, if you take all the 4 lines, among all the 4 lines, this is the outermost indentation. So it comes under the global scope indentation. These 3 lines of codes have inner indentations. Therefore, they come under the local scope indentation. But what if I pick only these 3 lines? Forget about the first one for a moment. Forget about the first line. I'm gonna pick these 3 lines. These 3 lines of codes. So among these 3 lines of codes, line 2 is the outermost. So it is the outermost indentation. Therefore, it comes under the global scope indentation among these 3 lines of codes. And the other two lines come under the local scope indentation. In case if you pick only these 3 lines of codes. Now, let me forget the second line as well. I'm gonna pick only the 2 lines of codes. These 2 lines of codes. So among these 2 lines of codes, line 3 is the outermost indentation. It comes under the global scope indentation. It is the outermost indentation. The second line is the inner indentation, which means it comes under the local scope indentation in case if we pick only these 2 lines of codes. So I hope it is clear now that what is local and global scope indentation in Python program.